the information that I want you to have about the Protestant Reformation. I'm going to put something up here really quick for you to look at, and you know what I'm going to do? Let's make it quicker. Starting to act like my mother-in-law, who's like, I can't see what we're doing on the computer. There you go, that's turning off. I'll look at it up here and then I'll blank it out so it doesn't. Come on, smartboard. Maybe there's no signal input. Good Lord, what is happening here, people? Oh, I get it. I know. They're all solved. Got it solved. There we go. Okay. I'm going to put a note up here for you. Okay. Yes, I know I'm presenting different. Thank you. Okay. Just have a read through that while we are while I'm introducing this concept here to you. It is very, very important when we look at history to put things into their proper context. And all too often, let me go back. There are schools of thought in history. There are various ways in which we can approach the subject of history. And depending on the prism or the lens that we use to look at history, we're going to look at different factors. We're going to evaluate different groups of people. We're going to weigh certain aspects more heavily than other aspects, and so on. So, for example, one of the schools of historical thought is what's called the frontier thesis, which is that geography shapes history. So when you think about it, England is a seafaring nation. England has been a powerful nation with a powerful navy rampaging across the earth for the last several hundred years. The frontier thesis would argue that the reason why England is such a world-dominating power and why the English people are the way that they are is because they live on an island, right? Why is it that Austria never ended up conquering a quarter of the globe? Well, Austria is a landlocked nation. They don't have a navy. So it's much, much harder for them to spread out and to spread their ideas and to spread their culture around the world, as opposed to the English, who live on an island. Therefore, their number one mode of transportation is the water. They have access to the water. Wherever the water leads, that's where the English can go. So we can look at geography and how that shapes nations. We can look at what's called Marxist history or conflict theory history, which is that all of history is a conflict between two groups of people. As Marx would say, Karl Marx, it's between the haves and the have-nots, or the bourgeois and the proletariat, or the rich or the poor, or the industrialists and the workers. But we can also apply that lens, if you think about the world in which we're living in today, we can apply that lens to white society and then non-white society, or straight society and LGBTQ society, or men and women in terms of jobs and positions, industrialized nations versus non-industrialized nations, et cetera, et cetera. So we can look at all history as a history of conflict. That certainly then changes the lens and the material that we will look at in terms of informing how we understand the world around us. There are a lot of schools of thought that specifically look at voices that are underrepresented in history. Like I said to you yesterday, there's not a lot of women's voices in this course. There's not a lot of BIPOC voices in this course because the vast majority of the European history is written by white European Christian men. That's who wrote the history. That's who figures prominently in the course. However, that doesn't mean that there weren't BIPOC people in Europe. That doesn't mean that there weren't women in Europe. I mean, every age of European history that we look at in this course, women made up 50% of the population. And I'm not exactly sure how it all works, but you need women in order to have more people, I think. It's a biology question. Ask a science teacher. I don't know. But you need, clearly there were women in history in the 1500s and 1600s and 1700s, even though we only have male voices primarily. So there are historical schools of thought that look at these underrepresented groups and bring them to the forefront. So we know what the fishmonger's wife was doing in France in 1762 or whatever it happens to be. But the predominant levels of the predominant schools of historical thought that we are used to, this is a long way of me getting around to what I'm having you read there. The predominant schools of historical thought are that forces shape history. So that's economics or politics or military or trade unionism, the rise of liberalism or conservative thought or socialist thought. So forces shape history, or great men shape history. And by great men, we mean great individuals. So whether that be Elizabeth I or Napoleon or Hitler or whomever, individuals shape history. That school of thought, which is the predominant school of thought, that individuals and forces shape history, has, of course, come under fire in the 20th century as not being truly accurate. Like, how can one person really shape the destiny of billions of people? However, it is important to use that lens on occasion, because it is, on occasion, the actions of an individual that have massive consequences for all people across time. Again, when we look back at history, would there have been a Second World War without Adolf Hitler? Probably. Probably. Because the First World War and the Treaty of Versailles and the injustices of the peace treaty that come after World War I create an environment in which the Italians are upset, the Spanish are upset, the Germans are upset, the Russians are upset. There are a lot of groups of people that are very, very angry at the way that the Treaty of Versailles ends, the First World War, and therefore, without Hitler, there would have been a fascism, because Benito Mussolini creates fascism in 1919. So without Hitler, there may have been a Nazism as well, or a German equivalent of the fascist movement, because, as we know, all across the world, there are fascist parties that rise up. Germany's got a fascist party, sure, but so does England, so does France, so does Spain, so does Canada, so does the United States. Fascism spreads because of Benito Mussolini, and the ideas of fascism are rooted in the injustices of the First World War. So, would there have been a Second World War without Adolf Hitler? Probably. But would there have been a Holocaust without Adolf Hitler? No. Hitler drives the Holocaust. His ideas, his particular take on Germany's future and so on and so forth, create the situation that leads to the Holocaust. Would there have been a industrialized world without Napoleon Bonaparte? Sure, there would have been. I mean, there's always inventions. We are always moving forward as a species. We're always reinventing ourselves, reinventing the things that we do. I mean, hey, the new iPhone 12 is going to be purple. So, you know, we're making progress when the iPhone's purple. I don't know why you buy an iPhone just because it's purple, but apparently people are going to be buying the iPhone because it's purple. There would have been an industrial revolution. There would have been all the changes that happened in Europe post-Napoleon without Napoleon Bonaparte. But you would not have had the death of feudalism in a generation without Napoleon Bonaparte conquering all of Europe and obliterating feudalism by replacing it with the Napoleonic Code. So it's important for us, even though it's out of fashion in the age in which we live in, to look at the role of an individual, the role of the great man of history to shape the destinies of billions of people. It is important for us every once in a while to recognize that, yeah, there are forces, and yes, there are other things, and yes, there are other voices, but without this one individual, who knows what would have happened. And that's the case with Martin Luther. In 1517, Martin Luther, this priest from a backwater in Wittenberg in Germany, decides he is angry enough with the Catholic Church, despite the fact he is a priest. He's angry enough with the Catholic Church to actually challenge the church's take on certain ideas, certain concepts, certain documents, and his decision to nail his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg on October 31st, 1517, will shatter the Catholic Church, will set in motion absolutism, will set in motion the Scientific Revolution and the Enlightenment and the French Revolution and Napoleon, and all of these reverberations, these seismic reverberations, come about because one individual decided, I'm done, I've had it, I've had enough. And that's the point of this particular introduction to Martin Luther, where we can say he's one of the few men where we can say truly the world was profoundly altered by his actions. And you might be saying, well, okay, Mr. Elmsford, but I'm not Christian. So how am I impacted by the fact that the Roman Catholic Church was impacted by Martin Luther? Because the Catholic Church, being the dominant, hegemonic, economic, political, military, social force in Europe at that point in time impacted and interacted with other religions around the world. Really, really important. Now, and I want to say this right off the bat when I point this out. Just because an individual does something important doesn't mean that that individual is worthy of our admiration. By many standards, not just today's standards, Martin Luther was not a really nice guy. He was anti-Semitic. He hated Jews. He was misogynistic. He thought women were inferior. He had no truck whatsoever for anybody that disagreed with him. He was an incredibly intolerant person, an incredibly arrogant person. So not really a kind of guy you'd want to hang out with. But that's neither here nor there. What matters is the actions, the consequences of his decisions, less so about his personality, because that's not really all that important to us at this point in time. All right. So before we go on, pull this back up. There we go. What I want to do. Yeah. All right. Zoom in here a little bit. Zoom, 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 zoom. Okay. Good. All right. Beat. Stop presenting. There we go. Now it's just me again. Hi. So before we go on, I'm going to assume that none of you know anything about the Roman Catholic Church. None of you know anything about the way in which the Catholic Church functions, or anything about the way in which the world in 1500 actually functioned. And so let's go back here a little bit. I'm going to talk just briefly about the structure of the Catholic Church and the structure of the Holy Roman Empire in 1517 to give us a bit of context for why and how Martin Luther's actions are so seismic and what he does. The Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, was founded, in fact, by, starts with St. Peter, the disciple of the historical Jesus, who comes to Rome following the crucifixion of the historical Jesus in and about 40 CE. And he lives in Rome from about 40 CE to about 60 CE. He is eventually persecuted and killed by the Emperor Nero. And he's crucified in Rome. And his bones then remain in Rome. When the Roman Empire converts to Christianity under the Emperor Constantine in and around 300 or so. These dates are just general. We don't really need to worry about how accurate they are. In and around 300 or so, when the Emperor Constantine converts to Christianity, he builds a church for St. Peter on the hill where St. Peter was crucified. There are bones in a crypt under the dome of St. Peter. So when you look at that cupola of the St. Peter's Basilica, directly underneath there is a crypt down there with bones that purportedly are the bones of St. Peter. Historians aren't exactly sure. That is what the story tells us. There's no way to do DNA tracing on that because we don't know who Peter was actually related to. So we can't compare the bones that are there to anybody else. But those are purportedly the bones of St. Peter. And every new pope, by the way, when he becomes pope, and it's always been a he, there was no Pope Joan, for any of you conspiracy theorists out there about a female pope. She's a historical myth. Every new pope goes down before he becomes the pope and goes into the crypt and spends some time with the bones of St. Peter. It's part of one of the rituals of becoming the pope and conferring with this first of the first leaders of the Christian church. Now, why St. Peter, and why do popes take their name from St. Peter or take their legacy from St. Peter? Because again, if we go back to the Bible, Jesus apparently at one point said to Peter, whose name was Simon, but he changed his name to Peter, says that you are the rock upon which I will build my church. So gives Peter the mantle of responsibility after his death. Now, when the Emperor Constantine converts to Christianity in roughly 300 CE, he then creates, because the Roman Empire spans across a tremendous amount of territory at that point. Swing over here to the map. Let me just pivot the camera here for you. When we look over there at the map, this entire, from Morocco here in the north, and there's me down there. From Morocco, all the way down through Tunisia, all the way through Egypt, the Middle East, through present-day Turkey, up into the Balkans, all the way through Italy, all the way north into present-day Germany, and up to partway into the north of England. All of this is the Roman Empire. It is a massive empire that the Emperor Constantine is in charge of. And so what the Emperor Constantine does is he creates 5 patriarchs, 5 individuals who are going to be his voices in the Catholic Church, or sorry, in the new Christian Roman Church, that will then be placed around the empire, that will then spread the ideas and enforce the ideas that the Emperor Constantine believes are Christian. On a little side note, the Emperor Constantine, I'm just going to move this back here, center it back. Am I centered back there again? A little bit off, that's okay. There we go, a little more. The Emperor Constantine, when he becomes the leader of the new Christian church, brings together Christian leaders and says, okay, what does this mean to be Christian? Because he doesn't really know. He converts to Christianity. And again, the stories differ whether or not he has a vision, or whether or not he saw a cloud with a cross with the sun behind it, or whether or not he had a dream before a big battle about the cross. Regardless, he agrees, or he makes a vow to himself, to God, that he will convert to the Christian faith from the polytheistic faith of the Romans if he wins the battle and maintains control of the empire. He wins the battle, converts to Christianity, doesn't know what it means though. So he brings together a bunch of church leaders, and they all disagree. They all don't have any real idea about what it is that they fully comprehend, fully agree upon, because they're all these individual little sects, S-E-C-T-S, of the Christian faith, this nascent Christianity. Which is part of the reason, again, when you look at the gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they disagree on a lot of different things. And there are other gospels as well. There's the gospel of Thomas, there's a gospel of Mary Magdalene, there's a gospel of Judas. There's a lot of gospels that are not in the Bible that don't necessarily agree on the concepts of what modern day Christians would say, well, this is what Christianity is. Emperor Constantine has lost his mind at this point and says, what do you mean we have all these disagreements? I don't get it. All of you get together and come up with what it means to be Christian. So he brings all the church leaders to a place in the Roman Empire called Nicaea, and he says, you're not leaving here until you come up with the rules for Christianity. And so the Council of Nicaea, as it's called, which meets for the better part of several years, come up with the concepts of modern day Christianity, the concepts of what Christianity is going to be. And if anybody has ever gone to church, and if anybody's ever said the Nicene Creed, or what's called the Apostles' Creed, that this comes from the Council of Nicaea. In approximately 330 CE, the Council of Nicaea come up with the concepts that there is the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. They agree upon the concept that Jesus died, was buried, and was reborn after 3 days. They agree on the fact that Mary was a virgin when Jesus was born. They agree on all these different concepts. So the foundations of Christianity are decided upon in 330 by the Council of Nicaea by the Emperor Constantine. He goes, good, fine, thanks. Now we've got an agreement. But then to enforce that one Christian viewpoint, he then creates 5 patriarchs, places them around the Roman Empire to enforce the Council of Nicaea's decisions. Well, the Roman Empire, 200 years later, collapses in about 500 CE. And as the barbarian invasions happen, as the Huns and the Visigoths and the Goths and the Vandals and so on all move in and tear apart the Roman Empire, 3 of the 5 patriarchs the positions are obliterated or gone. They cease to exist. And this also is exacerbated by the fact, just going back slightly in the story, the Emperor Constantine, because his empire is too big, divides his empire into a Western empire and to an Eastern empire with 2 capitals. So there is a Western capital in Rome and an Eastern capital in Constantinople, which is named after the Emperor Constantine, present-day Istanbul, which is the Eastern capital of his empire. 2 capitals, each capital's got a patriarch, and there's 3 other patriarchs spread around. There's one in Antioch, etc. It doesn't matter where the other ones are. When the empire falls, two of those patriarchs remain in positions of power. There is an Eastern patriarch in Constantinople, and there is a Western patriarch in Rome. As time goes on, then, the church based in Rome rebrands itself or renames itself the Roman Catholic Church. Why is it called the Roman Catholic Church? Roman, because it's in Rome. Catholic, because the word Catholic is Latin for what word? Does anybody know what the word Catholic means in Latin? No? Catholic means universal or worldwide. That's what it means. So this is the universal or the worldwide church of Rome. That's why it's called the Roman Catholic Church. Well, on the flip side, and the leader of the Roman Catholic Church is a patriarch called the Pope. The word patriarch gets devolved into the papacy. Papacy gets turned into the Pope, and that's where you have the Pope, or as the Italians call him, il Papa. On the other side of the old Roman Empire, you have the Eastern Patriarch in Constantinople. So there are two really old churches, Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. The Eastern Orthodox Church is called the Eastern Orthodox Church because it's in the eastern part of the Roman Empire, and Orthodox means traditional, because that's where the Emperor Constantine had his headquarters. That's where the Emperor Constantine lived for a large part of his life. The patriarch, there still is a patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox Church, says that we are the original, we are the traditional church of Christianity. So they got these two different views on Christianity, one in Rome, one in Constantinople. Just a long, well, brief but long history of where we get the Roman Catholic Church and where we get popes. Okay, any general questions on that? It not really has anything to do with Martin Luther, but it has to do with the structure of the church. Okay. Again, just jump in and interrupt me at any point in time, because I'm just happy talking to a camera all by myself. I do this at home all the time. I'll just be talking to myself. My wife's like, who are you talking to? Nobody. Just myself. Running through Monty Python lines or redoing old movie scenes in my head. It's quite enjoyable. So I'm okay talking to a camera, but if you want to interrupt me, just jump in. I will not be offended. Sometimes it's the only way to get a word in edgewise. Just jump in and cut me off. Okay, let's go back. I'm going to present this again here really quick. I want to look at the structure of, there we go. Away. I want to look at the structure of the church and the Holy Roman Empire, because there are two terms that matter. That matter for us. Here we go. Share. Going back to our note. Okay. So you've got the Holy Roman Empire and you've got the Catholic Church. These two entities exist in the same place at the same time. So despite the fact that, science and donkers will tell you that two objects cannot occupy the same space simultaneously, he's wrong. The Roman Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire occupied the same space simultaneously. But there are two individuals that are in charge of this. You've got Pope, il Papa, who is in charge of the Roman Catholic Church, and then you've got the Holy Roman Emperor, who is in charge of the Holy Roman Empire, in which the Catholic Church exists. A couple of quick things just about who these guys are and how they operate. All right, so let's just scroll down here really briefly. There we go. Okay, so on the left you see the Pope, and on the right you see the Holy Roman Emperor. The Pope is in charge of spiritual matters in the Holy Roman Empire, so going to heaven, going to hell, morality, etc. The emperor is in charge of temporal matters, so that's taxation, and that's road construction, and that's the non-religious, the secular elements of ruling. So you've got these two different people, one ruling the church, one ruling the state, and they both have this simultaneous power. The Pope is elected to his position of power by the cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church. So some of you may or may not remember when Pope, what's our current Pope called? Francis. When Pope Francis became the Pope. But if you didn't watch that on TV, or if you weren't paying attention to that, what happens is when the Pope dies, or now, because Benedict, the one before Francis, retired, when the Pope chooses to retire, all the cardinals from around the world will then go to Rome. They'll all return back to Rome. All these, there's hundreds of them. They'll all return back to Rome, and they will sequester themselves inside the Sistine Chapel in St. Peter's. That's where they will stay. And what they will do then is they will vote on which of their members. So you have to be a cardinal before you become the Pope. You don't just, nobody from outside is brought in. You have to be a cardinal. They will decide on which one of their members will become the next Pope. And what happens is they have a ballot, and if at the end of the first ballot they don't have a winner, which they usually don't, they take all of the ballots. And by the way, if you ever go into the Sistine Chapel, like I said, when you go there, it's definitely worth going to see. When you're in the Sistine Chapel, as you work your way towards the altar where the Last Judgment is coming down the wall, they file you in a door at the back. That's where you can see the altar, and you walk towards the altar, and then they file you out a door to the right of the altar where the Last Judgment is. When you are going out, as you're working your way out of this door, look to your right, to the right of the door, and there's a circle in the wall. And that circle connects to a chimney pipe, and that's where, when they have this conclave of the cardinals who all arrive to vote for the Pope, they will bring in a stove and hook that stove up to this chimney. They take all the ballots, if there's nobody that won, they take all the ballots and they take some wet reeds and they put them inside the fire, and it lets out this big plume of black smoke. And the plume of black smoke comes out of the top of St. Peter's Basilica, and all the faithful who are all outside in St. Peter's Square will see the black smoke billowing up and go, ugh, and realize they don't have a pope yet. And then what they'll do is they'll vote again, they'll vote again, they'll vote again until they whittle it down to a single leader. When one person finally wins the ballot, they take all those ballots, put them in the fire with a bunch of dry reeds, and this lets off this plume of white smoke, and then all the bells in St. Peter's begin to peal, and then bells in churches all around the world begin to peal, and we've got a new pope and he's in charge. So when St. Francis dies or retires, watch when that happens and you'll see what I mean. This has been happening now for 1800 years. So the Pope is chosen by the cardinals. He's not divinely ordained by God. He's not born to the position. He's chosen by the cardinals. The Holy Roman Emperor as well is chosen, because in the Holy Roman Empire you have got individuals, 7 of them, called the electors. And the electors are powerful princes in various parts of the Holy Roman Empire. There's one in Vienna, there's one in Prague, there's one in Berlin, there is one in Geneva. So you've got these electors, there's one in Rome. There are electors scattered all throughout the center part of Europe. Think about all the Central European countries, Germany, Austria, Italy, Switzerland, etc. 7 guys that are scattered throughout the Holy Roman Empire. One of them is chosen to be the Holy Roman Emperor. When he dies, it's always been a he, when he dies, they all gather in whatever city he was from, whether that be Vienna or Berlin or Prague or wherever. They all gather in the old elector's city, and the elector's son now becomes the new elector, or the old emperor who died. His son becomes the new elector of that area, of Brandenburg or of Prague or whatever. And the 7 electors among themselves decide which of their 7 will become the new Holy Roman Emperor. Sometimes it gets passed down father to son, but not all the time. So it's not necessarily a hereditary empire, it's a elected empire. So the more powerful the individual, if the emperor has done a good job, maybe his son becomes the next emperor. If the emperor has failed to defend the Holy Roman Empire against invasions by the Turks, or he's failed to protect the Holy Roman Empire against the bubonic plague, or whatever happens to be the case, whatever has, whatever ill has befallen the Holy Roman Empire, then maybe he doesn't become the emperor. Maybe somebody else steps into that role and becomes the next Holy Roman Emperor. On a little side note, the electors of the Holy Roman Empire are members of families that will remain in power all the way down until the 20th century. So the elector who lives in Vienna, his family name, anybody know what the family name of the elector of Vienna is?
Habsburg.
The Habsburgs. So they are the ones that that live in Vienna all the way back in 1517, and the last Holy Roman Emperor, the last Austrian Emperor will die in 1917 during the First World War. The elector of Brandenburg, which is in Prussia, anybody know what his family name is?
Hollern.
Close, yeah, the Hohenzollerns. So the Hohenzollerns will become are the electors of Brandenburg, will become the kings of Prussia, then will become the kings of Germany, and the last of the Hohenzollern kings, Kaiser Wilhelm II, will rule in 1918 as well. So we've got a connection all the way back to these royal families, but in the Holy Roman Empire, one of these families will become the dominant family or a lesser family, depending on how the election works, okay? Now, going back to our note here, the important thing about this is at the bottom. So you've got these two guys, both of whom are in a position for a limited period of time. That's important because during the Protestant Reformation of 1917, theoretically, and I'm going to move this down a bit so you can read that a bit better. Theoretically, both these people are supposed to be equal in power, but that's not the way that it works. One of them is always more powerful than the other. So if you've got a particularly strong pope and a particularly weak Holy Roman Emperor, then the Pope will run roughshod over the Holy Roman Emperor and will be able to force policies in the Holy Roman Empire that he couldn't otherwise do. For example, every time there was a crusade, so there were 4 or 5 crusades that the Roman Catholic Church led into the Holy Land to try and take back Jerusalem and so on. Every single one of those crusades from about 1050 AD all the way through to the 1300s was launched by a particularly powerful pope at a time when there was a particularly weak Holy Roman Emperor. And afraid of the Pope, the Emperor says, oh, okay, and got everybody going, and off they went and invaded the Islamic territories of the Middle East in order to regain control over the Holy Lands. On the other hand, there had been moments where there has been a particularly strong Holy Roman Emperor, which means that secular power or temporal power is far more persuasive, far more important than religious power. And that's what happens when we have the 1517 Protestant Reformation. The Pope at the time is a guy named Leo X. He is not a very good Pope. He is not a very strong Pope. He's in an incredibly weak position because the papacy itself is virtually bankrupt. Leo X doesn't help this. He exacerbates the problem by having lavish parties and wasting, in today's money, millions and millions and millions of dollars on all kinds of things, runs up tremendous debts with very, very powerful families. So it puts him in a very bad position. The Pope is not powerful, not well liked, and not really any position to throw his weight around in 1517. On the flip side, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, is one of the more powerful, ruthless, vicious emperors that ever sits on that throne. And so for him, religious authority is not anywhere near as relevant as his secular power. And any little problems that are going on religiously are not really any concern of his. Had it been the other way around, and you had a strong pope, probably the Protestant Reformation doesn't happen. Probably Martin Luther is stopped in his tracks in 1517. Probably the church doesn't let this get out of hand, which it does by 1519 and 1520. And by the time they realize there's a real problem, they can't stuff that genie back in the bottle. It's exploding all over the Holy Roman Empire. And the Pope would have stopped it earlier had he been stronger. And had he been able to dominate the Holy Roman Emperor and get the Emperor to do what he wanted, then the Emperor would have rounded up Martin Luther, hung him from a church door, and that would have been it. But because the Pope can't tell the Emperor what to do in 1517, and the Emperor doesn't really care what's going on with the church in 1517, Martin Luther kind of squeaks into this perfect little storm and unleashes the Protestant Reformation in 1517. Okay, so it's a little bit of context for why and how this happened. Sometimes it's not, even though we said Martin Luther is one of these individuals in history that really does change the world in which we live. In this case, it's great man history, but also coupled with the forces that are acting or that affect the world in which this guy is living at that point in time. Had things been different, things probably would have turned out differently. But that's what is history, and we don't do that here. Okay. Let's look really quickly. I'm going to go back here. Oh, what am I doing there? Go back. Here we go. Classwork. All right. Now, a little bit here about Martin Luther for you. And by the way, folks, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on these notes. For anybody that is interested in this, and I'm trying to get my head around, let me just do this here really quick again. Where'd my mouse go? Ah, I gotta move over there. I'm going to move my computer for tomorrow, by the way, so this is better. Stop presenting for a second. Okay. I'm trying to get my head around a little bit about how to do this course without the tests and without the things that we would normally have, because again, in a regular year, I'd have these notes up, you'd be copying notes down, you'd be taking information down, then 3 weeks from now, you'd regurgitate it back to me on a test, and I'd say, well done, give your brain a kiss, you understand the concepts. In our case here, we don't necessarily need to get into all the details of the stories because there's not going to be a test. So what I'm grappling with right now is to give you enough context, enough information that you can make sense of where the European story is going. We have to keep the story at least intact in a certain way without necessarily going into all the detail that we would normally. So I've got these notes that I'm going to be pulling up, and I've got certain things that are highlighted and so on. I'm going to post all the notes for you later on. If you're interested, you want to go back and do a bit more research on this, or there's something that you don't quite understand and you want to go back and do a bit more of your own investigation, then the notes will all be there. I'm going to pull notes up. I'm going to highlight a certain thing and then pull that note back down, and pull another note up and highlight a certain thing and then pull that note back down. And I just want to let you know that you don't have to go back and read all those notes. Just they're there for context for you, so that if you want the information, you can go back and you can look at them later. Okay. But let's talk really quickly about who Martin Luther was, what he did, why it is that he starts his Protestant Reformation in 1517, and ultimately what I want to look at is what the two key ideas are that he comes up with that really challenged the Catholic Church in 1517. Now, there are a number of things that lead Martin Luther to this position, to this moment in 1517. The Catholic Church had been undergoing a lot of problems in the 150 years or so prior to Martin Luther. So, since the Avignon papacy, so since the Pope had been captured and taken to Avignon in the south of France in the 100 Years' War, there have been all kinds of problems in the Catholic Church. You've got people like St. Francis of Assisi that are saying that the church is becoming too worldly. The church is forgetting its role, which is not to be, it's to live in this world, but not be of the world. We shouldn't be getting wealthy and rich on the backs of the people that we are taking money from. So when we're collecting money at church on Sundays, that should be, as Jesus said, to go and help the poor. We should be loving our neighbors as ourselves. We shouldn't be building ourselves a condo in Maui, and not that folks were doing that, but you understand what I'm saying. We shouldn't be buying, a Learjet for ourselves and driving around in Ferraris. We should be helping the poor. And yet, the Catholic Church by 1517 is the largest landowner in all of Europe. It is the richest institution in all of Europe. Cardinals, bishops, popes are the Bill Gateses and the Jeff Bezoses of the 16th century. They are incredibly wealthy people, living in palaces, having lavish meals, eating off gold plates, rubies all over their hands, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of people that are upset at the corruption of the church. On top of that, the Catholic Church, individuals who lead the Catholic Church aren't necessarily religious individuals. And you might think that's odd, right? Like, if you're going to be a leader of the church, you should know what you're actually leading. But that's not the case. Your average priest, like Martin Luther, your average priest is a devout Christian, is a person that's probably read the Bible, that understands the Bible, that tends to their flock and helps the people in their local area. However, the bishops and the cardinals are not religious people. At this point in time, let's say it was 1450 or so. And if there's any guys on the meet, and I'm only speaking to guys right now because inheritance in the 1400s, the family estate could only go to males. Women couldn't inherit the family estate unless you're a queen, in which case you can change the rules. But your average, baron's son or duke's son or earl's son only the son could inherit the property, not the daughter. So we're only talking to guys here for a quick second. If you are the firstborn son in your family, congratulations, you get the entire estate. You get all the land, you get all the tools, you get all the animals, you get all the buildings. It's all yours. Congratulations. And you get the title. So you are the Earl of whatever, or the Baron of whatever, or the Duke of whatever. But let's say you're the second-born son. Well, what do you get? Nada. You don't get anything from your family estate. However, what your family will do is they will purchase for you a commission in the military. So you want to be a colonel or a major in the military, then they will purchase a commission for you. You jump right over private and corporal and sergeant and all that stuff. You jump right to the top. You get to be in a position of authority in the military. You get to have a nice big tent. You get to have all kinds of servants. You get to live a nice lavish lifestyle. So you still live like a noble, but you don't live there at home. The family estate pays for you to have this job that you're going to have for the rest of your life that is befitting of someone of your rank. Well, let's say you're the third-born son. First guy gets the estate, second guy goes in the military, third guy, well, we'll buy you a bishopric. So you get to be a bishop, or we'll, if we're really wealthy, we'll buy you a cardinal see. So you get to be the cardinal who now is in charge of a particular area. Did you go to seminary school? No. Have you ever read the Bible? No. Do you want to take a vow of chastity and a vow of poverty? Hell no. So you then take over this position. You wear the purple robes or the red robes. You live in a castle, and you have servants, and you have all kinds of money pouring in because you collect money every week at the churches, and it all comes pouring into you, and you live a tremendously wealthy, successful life. But you're not a religious leader. You're not a person who actually cares about the church. You just care about the money. That's what you care about, and living, which is why so many bishops had mistresses or wives and had children. Cardinals had mistresses and wives and children. Popes had mistresses and wives and children. And in fact, 3 different popes, when they died, their son, think about that, because the pope's supposed to be celibate, not supposed to have sexual relations, the pope's son that was illegitimate that he had with his mistress becomes the next pope because he's able to buy the election. In fact, Leo X buys the papacy, the papal election in 1507, by buying off his other chief rival, because he was a cardinal, Leo X, buys off his chief rival with 7 mule loads of silver. I don't know what a mule load is, but it's probably a lot. He buys him off and goes, here's a massive check. Off you go, and he becomes the pope. So he buys the papacy. These are the people that are in charge of the church. Now, the church since has reformed itself because of the Martin Luther's Reformation, but the church at the time is a very corrupt institution, very, very wealthy. And that's going to factor into our story here, because Martin Luther is a person who is very, very devout. He has read the Bible. He is a professor of theology. He is fluent in Latin and in German and Italian. He has read the Bible in its original Greek, and he has also read the Bible in its Latin form. The original Bible was written in Greek. I'm not sure if you know that or not, but Jesus and the historical Jesus and the historical disciples would have spoken Aramaic. However, being illiterate, which is what all of them would have been, the people who were scholars at the time in about 40 through 100 CE, the popular language of the time, the most common language of the time, because of the Alexandrian Greek Empire from prior to that, was still predominantly Greek in the Middle East. So although Latin begins to take over that as the Roman Empire spreads around the world, Greek is the predominant language in the Greek is the predominant language in the Middle East at that point in time. So the original Bible was written in Greek. Then it gets translated into Latin. Just like, by the way, if we were alive in the 1720s, the predominant language across all of Europe would have been French, because everyone imitates Louis XIV. What's the most dominant language on the planet today? English, because of the British Empire. You go forward 100 years, it might be a different language again entirely, altogether. Whatever the dominant empire of the time is, usually it plants its impact through the language. So it's written in Greek. He understands that. He's read the Greek Bible. He's read the Latin Bible. And the problem with Martin Luther is he is racked with guilt. Absolutely racked with guilt, because he is afraid that while he's talking to people who are coming to him, saying confession to him and asking for forgiveness, he very much feels like he is not in any position to forgive them because he's a sinner himself. So he has this guilty sort of complex going over and over and over again in his mind. How can I forgive people for their sins when I am a sinner myself? And this guilt and this fear, here we go, present the entire screen. This guilt and this fear ultimately lead to Martin Luther having a nervous breakdown in 1510. Because to his credit, he doesn't feel that he is better than the people he is dealing with. They're coming to him saying, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. He's like, we're all sinners. How can I forgive you when I'm no better than you are? I feel lust, and I feel greed, and I feel guilt, and I feel envy, and I feel all these other things too. Oh, terrible. That's a nervous breakdown, 1510. One of his superiors, a bishop, says, listen, you are clearly at the end of your tether. Why don't you take a bit of a break, get away from all this? I've got a bunch of documents and a bunch of things that have to go to Rome. Why don't you take a pilgrimage? You ever been to Rome? He's like, I haven't been to Rome. I'm a terrible priest. He goes, fine. Whoa, shh. Take a trip, go to Rome, clear your head, and come back, and then we'll get going again. And ironically, when his superior sends him to Rome in 1510, this is what's really going to galvanize or focus Martin Luther's angst upon an external thing, right? Prior to that, he's focusing on himself, like, oh, I'm terrible, I'm a terrible person. After 1510, he realizes the problem is not me. The problem is the institution. That's the problem. So in 1510, he goes to Rome, and he is absolutely distraught by what he sees. Cardinals riding around in carriages and lavish dinner parties and massive palaces and concubines and mistresses and sex and booze. And I mean, it is not at all what he had thought the Roman Catholic Church should be. And what he realizes is that every week when he's taking money from the poor, because the people give money every week, right? They're supposed to give what's called a tithe, which is 10%. If you were a Roman Catholic in 1517, 1510, you had to, not should, but you had to give 10% of your gross income every year to the church. Had to, minimum. Which means if you're making $100,000 a year gross, you got to give the Catholic Church 10 grand every year. That's $200 a week you got to give them. Have to, otherwise you go to hell. That's it. Well, Luther has realized that all this money he's taking from these poor people in Wittenberg isn't going to help the poor. It's not alms to make the world a better place. It's putting a ruby ring on that guy's finger and buying that gold plate and buying that carriage or paying the bill for the prostitutes and the booze. He is very, very, very upset about that. What really sets him off is when he works his way back, he goes to Venice. And in Venice, if you ever go to Venice, the Piazza San Marco in Venice is a beautiful place. I love Venice. It's my third favorite city in all of Europe. One second. Beautiful place, Venice. If you're going to travel to Venice, though, travel tip number 4, do not go in July. Because, good Lord, it stinks in July because of all the fish and the garbage in the canals. Oh, it is awful. Travel tip number 5, if you go to Venice, don't do a gondola ride, okay? Everybody, when you go, I mean, we see the gondolas and, you know, everyone is, you know, that's what you do. You go to Venice, you get in a gondola, there's a guy in a stripy shirt with a red bandana singing to you in opera as he, you know, paddles you around the canals. For a lot of people, that's a really unique experience. But for Canadians, it's not a terribly unique experience because, folks, ultimately, what is a gondola that we have lots of here in Canada?
A canoe?
It's a canoe, okay? So you can rent a canoe at Grand River, kayaking and canoeing, and just canoe down the lake out here. And it's not going to cost you 150 euros, and you're not going to be sitting this far above a canal that's filled with garbage, and you're not going to be having an Italian guy yelling Italian in your ear, yelling opera at you. It's really not worth it. It's nice to see, so take a picture of it and watch people, all the tourists go and do it. it's just a canoe, guys. It's really it's not really worth the money. Take that 150 euros and do something better with it. Buy a mask in Venice. Do something else. By the way, speaking of that, travel tip number 6, Piazza San Marco, which is what you've seen in James Bond films, you've seen it in a ton of movies. It's that one big open square in Venice. It's where all the tourists go. It's the main hub, the main economic hub of Venice. That's where you go to buy 3 things. You go to buy masks in Venice, you go to buy gold in Venice, 18-karat gold, and you go to jewelry, and you go to buy glass, blown glass. Here's your tip. You're in the Piazza San Marco, and you see the gold, and you see the masks, and you see the blown glass. You're like, I really want to get something like that because I'm in Venice. I've got to get a souvenir of Venice. Don't buy it there. Go off the Piazza San Marco in any direction. Go 2, 3, 4, 5 streets off, and what you'll find is you'll find mask shops, and you'll find gold shops, and you'll find blown glass shops. And the exact same mask, or the exact same necklace, or the exact same unicorn, blown unicorn thing you were going to buy is there, but it's a third the cost that it was in the Piazza San Marco. Why is it so expensive in the Piazza San Marco? Because the tour boats that come in there only stop in the piazza for an hour, so people only have time to walk around that piazza, go into the Chiesa San Marco, go get a cup of coffee, buy a souvenir, get back on the boat and go. So the prices are jacked right up. So don't buy it there. Take 10 extra minutes, go walking to a different street, and you'll find the exact same thing for half the price or a third of the price. There you go. A bunch of travel tips here today, folks. This is fantastic. It's making me hankering for a travel. Anyway, in the Piazza San Marco, St. Mark's Square, there's a church in the back corner. When you stand there with the canal behind you, when you're looking, you'll see this big church called the Chiesa San Marco, which is where the bones of St. Mark are. Okay, so there's this church built around the bones of St. Mark. So again, one of the disciples of Jesus, his bones were in the Middle East, and they were brought back by some monks in the 12th century. They smuggled them back to Italy in a pickle barrel. That's neither here nor there. It's just an interesting story. And then they build a church around the bones of St. Mark. Luther, on his way back from Rome, decides to stop in Venice to venerate the bones of St. Mark. Goes into the Chiesa San Marco, and here again, travel tip number 7. This will be the last travel tip for today, I think. Go into the Chiesa San Marco, which is free. Okay, again, it's a beautiful church. It's a Byzantine church, which is very different from a lot of the churches you'll find in Northern Europe, which tend to be more Gothic, and certainly different from the churches you'll find in France and in Italy, which are more classical churches like St. Peter's or Notre Dame. The Byzantine church, which has got more of an Eastern Orthodox element to it, it's a beautiful church, interesting to see, built traditionally the way the churches are built, in a cross section with the altar at the head, at the nave of the church. But you walk in the back, go in, have a look at the church. But this church, the Chiesa San Marco, has got an interesting, unique feature, which is when you get to the back of the church, there's an altar. Well, at the front of the church, there's an altar there. And what you probably will not see in any other church around the world is there are turnstiles to either side of the altar. You know, those things that you have to put money into, or you have to scan a ticket in order to, you know, make it go click as you walk by it. There are turnstiles, and it costs like 4 euros to get a ticket to hit the turnstile and to go behind the altar. So imagine, in a regular church, here's the altar, the priests are looking out at the congregation. There's an altar backdrop behind the priest. In a lot of churches, it might be a cross, or it might be a lot of different things. There's this altar that's there, and there's a turnstile there and a turnstile there, and you can walk around behind the altar. Well, that just piqued my curiosity when I was there. I hadn't done any, I'm a terrible traveler in terms of reading up on places before I go there. I just go and just kind of wander around and find stuff, which sometimes leads to really good experiences and sometimes not so good. Anyway, I didn't know anything about this, so I said to my wife, girlfriend at the time, wife now, I said, let's go, let's walk around. It's got to be something. I mean, they're not going to charge you money for nothing, right? So we went around behind this altarpiece. And what you'll see on the back of this, and this is worth the couple of euros ticket to do this, when you go around the back, there is a mosaic on the back of this altar. So what the congregation sees is this, right? This plain thing with a cross. But what the priests would have seen in the 1500s, and what you can see if you buy the ticket, is you go around the back, and there is a mosaic on the back of this altarpiece. And the mosaic, the altar itself, is about 15 feet long and about 6 feet high. So it's as long as this table in front of my room and 6 feet high. There's a mosaic, in the middle of it is Jesus, and around Jesus are all these different elements from the Bible, and Jesus doing various things and miracles and turning water into wine and so on. And what it looks like is this. Okay. So what you see there is this gold. All the gold here, all the gold color is actual gold. It's 18 karat gold. The entire thing is one big massive 15 by 6 sheet of gold. And inlaid into that, a mosaic, right, are all those little pieces of glass that show a picture or make up a picture. All the reds you see in this mosaic are rubies. All the green you see are gold. All the blues you see are sapphires. All the whites you see are diamonds. There are thousands of precious stones all inlaid into this massive sheet of gold on the back of this church. It is an incredible fortune that only a handful of priests would ever see in 1517, 1510. Martin Luther sees this and he snaps. He realizes the church is corrupt. Something's got to be done. This is crap. We can't do this anymore. We can't do this to people. We've got to fix the system. The system is wrong. So he goes back to Wittenberg in 1517, determined to shake things up. By the way, when you go there, and when I went around and saw this, my jaw just dropped, because all of a sudden you realize, I mean, I'm not a wealthy guy, and you're standing in the presence of all of these stones that are just there. And I leaned in kind of close to get a look at some of the stones, and my wife, girlfriend at the time, grabbed my arm and pulled me back. I'm like, what? What I didn't realize is that there's 2 guards back there with guns, because it's precious stones. And as I leaned in, both of them started to walk towards me and put their hands on their guns as if I was going to reach out and just, yeah, I'll take that ruby. So I nearly got tasered in a church in Italy. Don't touch the altar. Anyway, going back here. Where's our note? There it is. Okay, so he comes back, and what he says is, we have to fix the church. I believe in the church, he says, but the system is corrupt. We've got to fix it. Well, how do you fix the church? He doesn't really know where to start. And here's where we have the connection between the Renaissance and the Reformation. And we're almost done our story here, folks. I'm going to let you go. But here we have the connection between the Renaissance and the Reformation. The humanists that we talked about yesterday, the really geeky Indiana Joneses that go around translating the Greek and the Roman documents, say that if we want to emulate the greatness of the past, we want to recreate the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire and the glories of the accomplishments of Western civilization, then we should imitate the Greeks and the Romans, which is why the art that imitates the Greeks and the Romans, we have the nude statues and nude paintings and so on. Well, Luther is inspired by that to go back to the original Bible, the Greek Bible, not the Latin Bible, but the Greek one. And when he begins to read the original Bible, he realizes that there's been a couple of translational errors in the Bible when they've made it. Now, these are not intentional errors, but these are errors that happen all the time whenever you're translating from one language to another. There are certain words, like, for example, in German, there is a word called Gemütlichkeit. And Gemütlichkeit has no English translation, direct English translation. But what it means is kind of like a good time feeling, a good camaraderie. So imagine in a non-COVID time, you're sitting around with your whole bunch of friends, and you're just laughing and carrying on and just enjoying yourself and just enjoying the company. And it's a nice, happy, warm kind of moment. That's Gemütlichkeit in German. We don't really have a word for that. So if you were to translate Gemütlichkeit from a German text into an English text, you'd say, you know, they felt cozy, or they felt a sense of joy, but it's not really quite the same thing. Some of these, by the way, some of these translations are important, right? Like when you think about Snow White, right? Snow White, when Snow White was first written down and published by the Brothers Grimm, who were German storytellers from the Bavarian forest, the Black Forest, when the Brothers Grimm wrote down not Snow White, Cinderella, which is a French fairy tale, they made a bit of a translational error. Because if you think about this, right, think about the story of Cinderella. She gets turned into a princess, and the pumpkin gets turned into a carriage, and the mice get turned into footmen, and so on, because her fairy godmother helps her out. She goes, she meets the prince, they make out on the dance floor, and then the bell rings at 12, and she's got to bolt before everything turns back into a pumpkin. And as she's running back, she drops her slipper, right? Glass slipper is dropped. That's what the prince then takes the glass slipper and goes around to try and find her, puts the glass slipper on her foot, goes, "Hey, I found the girl I want to marry," and he marries her. Think about this. Does it make sense that she would wear a slipper made out of glass? Not really. Like, I mean, high heels, I understand, are difficult enough and uncomfortable enough to walk in, let alone a glass high heel shoe. Not terribly comfortable. Well, that's not originally what Cinderella wore in the original French fairy tale. It was translated wrongly by the Brothers Grimm. The word that was used in the French fairy tale was verre, V-E-R-R-E. Okay, that's what the Brothers Grimm thought it was, and verre is glass. So they said, well, she's wearing a glass slipper, put it into German and called it a glass slipper. But there is another word in French that sounds like the word for glass, spelt differently, also pronounced verre, which means fur. And which makes more sense? That Cinderella is wearing a slipper made out of glass in the Middle Ages, or a slipper made out of fur in the Middle Ages? Fur makes more sense. So she was wearing a fur slipper, a fur-lined slipper that she dropped. That's what the prince found. That's what he wanted. So, but this translation from fur to glass changes the whole story. Same thing happens with the Christian story of the Virgin Mary, right? The original Greek word that has been translated into Latin and then translated into English, in other words, is virgin, the Virgin Mary. And perhaps, depending on your faith, perhaps Mary was a virgin when she gave birth to Jesus. But the original word in the original Greek Bible also has two other translations. It can be translated as virgin, but it can also be translated as young, so a young woman who gave birth to a child. It can also be translated more commonly as pure. So she was a pure woman. And again, we think about virginal as pure. We think about, virgin olive oil as pure oil, right? It's not diluted, it's not tainted, and so on. So the word that has been translated as virgin maybe meant that she was a pure, a non-sinner of a woman. Again, these translational issues can have some problems when you look at them. In the original Greek Bible, Luther finds one of these key translational issues. Okay, and here we have the first one. So in the original Bible, and these are the important thing here for Martin Luther. I'm going to stop after I do this. The important thing here is that you have the justification by faith, which is his first revelation, and his second revelation is a change of heart. It says many times in the New Testament that justification, or salvation is a better way for us to understand the word justification. Salvation comes through faith. So, as Jesus said, no one gets to the Father except through me. No one gets into heaven except by me. All of the Acts of the Apostles and so on and so forth all talk about the fact that believing in Jesus is the most important thing. If you believe in God and Jesus, then you go to heaven. Well, and it says it over and over and over again. Well, Luther, when he realizes this, all of a sudden has a huge weight lifted off of his shoulders. Because, remember, he was feeling guilty about how can I absolve people of their guilt? How can I help them go to heaven when I'm a sinner myself? Well, his first revelation, when he realizes, is if I believe in God, and if I'm a faithful, devoted follower of God, I automatically get to go to heaven. That's all it takes. All justification, salvation comes through faith alone. Not through good works, not through anything else you do. It comes not through confession, it comes through faith. Huge weight off of his back, huge weight off the back of all of his parishioners, because they all devotedly believe in God. And it also directly flies in the face of the Roman Catholic doctrine at this point in time, which is to charge indulgences. What does that mean? The Catholic Church, if anybody here is Catholic or anybody's aware of some of the rules of Catholicism, when you go and you say confession to a priest, you say, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been a number of weeks since my last confession." You say what you did. When you confess, the priest, after you're done saying what you did, the priest then says, "Ego te absolvo," so he absolves you of your sin, takes that sin off of your soul, right? But then, in order to make that stick, you have to do penance. You have to do something for it. So let's say, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I got really mad at my sister and I punched her in the head because she wouldn't leave my room." Well, the priest might say, "Okay, well, ego te absolvo of your sins. You're absolved. Go in peace." You have to say 4 Hail Marys, 5 Our Fathers every day for the next week, and you need to make your sister's bed and clean up her room for the next month. So you need to make up for what you did wrong. That's penance. Well, depending on what you did, how bad it was, the penance goes up. In the Middle Ages, if you committed murder, so you killed somebody, the penance that you had to do was to go on a pilgrimage. So let's say that you're in Paris and you killed somebody. You go to the priest, say, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I killed this guy." The priest says, "Okay, well, you need to go on a pilgrimage to Lourdes. From here, from Paris to Lourdes, which is 400 kilometers, you need to go from here to there, stopping at every church along the way, make a donation, pray for forgiveness, make it to Lourdes, pray for forgiveness, make a donation, and then come back, stopping at every church along the way and make a donation." You might think, "That's not too bad. It's 400 kilometers. I can do there and back." But no, you have to do that on your knees. So that's going to take you months or a year to go and make up for your sin because you did something really bad. You killed somebody. Well, some noble guy in the Middle Ages said, Father. Like, surely. There's got to be some way we can work this out. Like, I don't want to go to Lourdes on my knees. That's gonna be awful. That's okay for the average person, but I'm rich. So, like, what do you need? You tell me what you need, Father. You tell me, and I'll help you. What do you need? And you need a new belfry in the church. You want some new bells? How about new pews for everybody? Hey, Father, how about you want a nice new house? How about that? And a couple of priests begin to realize, okay, I guess that is penance. If you're going to pay for a new addition to the church, that's sure, I'll take a new addition to the church. Or sure, I'll take $100,000 for brand new pews. Quickly, what the Catholic Church realizes is this is a moneymaker. So instead of giving people penance, what the Catholic Church does, starting around 1300, is they start to charge you for salvation. So you go in there, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I punched my sister in the head because she wouldn't leave my room." Okay, I'll absolve you of your sins, but that'll be $100. If you don't pay the $100, you're going to hell for that. That's all there is to it. Well, let's say that you murdered somebody. Well, that's going to be a cool $1.5 million. You got $1.5 million? Give me the $1.5 million. We'll call it square. Even worse, imagine this. Your mom dies, or your gam-gam dies. You're distraught. It's like, she had so much to live for, gam-gam. Why? The priest comes up to you after the service and says, "Can we talk for a quick second? Listen, I know you loved your gam-gam. She was a lovely lady. Wonderful. Loved the oatmeal raisin cookies she made. Still had the scarf she made me. Wonderful woman. Problem. She died with sins on her soul. I warned her. Tried to warn her. She had to get those sins off her soul, and she didn't do it. So right now, Gam-Gam's sitting in purgatory getting poked by some demons. Now, when the rapture comes, when God comes and raises the dead, if Gam-Gam still has the sins on her soul, she's burning for all time in a lake of hellfire. But luckily this week, we got a deal on souls that are in purgatory. 50 grand gets Gam-Gam out, and she can go stare at the face of God for the rest of time. Now, you don't know if Gam-Gam died with sins on her soul, but you don't want Gam-Gam getting poked by devils and burning in a lake of fire, and you devoutly believe that's what's going to happen. So what do? You go and mortgage your house, and you pay the 50 grand to the church just in case. This is where the church is making all its money in 1517. And Martin Luther, looking at the justification by faith, says, BS. You don't have to pay. No more pay for anything. Salvation is free. If you believe it, you believe in God, then you're going to heaven. Stop paying the church. Huge. And you can see why, for the average person, that's a good deal. Because now I don't have to pay any money. I can just go to heaven because I'm a good believer. The other key thing that Martin Luther talks about is this thing right here called the change of heart. And here's where we have the translational issues. The Roman Catholic, the Latin Bible, uses the term penitentia, which is where penance comes from. The actual Greek word is metanoia, which is translated from metanoia into penitentia. Penitentia is an action of doing, it's some sort of action. That's the root of that word. Metanoia is a transformation, is what it means. So it's still kind of the same thing, action, transformation, there's something happening. But what metanoia, what the original Greek Bible said was, for you to be forgiven of your sins, you have to have a change of heart. You have to truly be sorry for what you did. Not just say, I'm sorry. And we've all had this, right? Where, you've had to apologize to someone and you didn't want to apologize. You're like, all right, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Sorry. Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're not sorry, right? And they can tell in your tone, they can tell in your body language, they can tell in the way you're talking. You're not sorry. You're really not. But most of you probably have done something really bad at some point, and you're like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. 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 There's a big difference between, whatever, I'm sorry, and I'm so sorry. That second one, that's the one you want. The second one, when you really, truly regret what you did, that's the key. Luther says, no more money. Not paying. No more. And that's what the 95 Theses say in 1517. When he nails those to the church, that's what it says. We're not paying anymore for salvation. We don't have to pay anymore. We have to believe in God. We have to be good Christians. That's it. And you can imagine how that reverberates like a tidal wave across the Catholic Church in 1517, when their most lucrative moneymaker is now getting yanked out from underneath them, and the walls are about to fall down on the Catholic Church. Luther's big impact is he challenges the very structure and dogma of the Catholic Church at a vulnerable time for the Catholic Church. Okay? Questions and all that. So, sorry, it's an hour 20. I know it's very long, so I apologize. These won't all be this long, by the way, these Google Meets. But no? Okay. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to change cameras. I'm going to come over here and sit down. So give me 1 second. Bear with me. Stop presenting. Change the camera. Video. Hi, everybody. Here we are. Okay, so here's what we're going to do then for the remainder of the morning. I am going to post these notes for you right now. So bear with me for one quick sec. So on your computers, you're going to hear ping, 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 ping as these things all jump up. Again, there's more details here on the Protestant Reformation. There's more elements and context for what Luther did and the Lutheran Reformation and so on. You're more than welcome to go back and read them if you wish. You don't need to, but it just gives a bit more context because I sort of skipped and jumped around the story a little bit. I'm also going to post a note here called The Spread of the Protestant Reformation, which talks in more detail about Huldrych Zwingli and Jean Calvin and so on. And we're going to look at a number of other things. But what I'm going to post right now for you, and I'm going to go back here and just present a tab. Present a tab. Classwork. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to present, yes, I know I'm presenting to everyone. So I'm going to post this for you right now called The Impact of the Reformation. And for the next 13 minutes or so, what I want you to do is watch John Green's video on the Reformation and its consequences. So it picks up the story right where I left off with Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses on the church door, and then looks at the
unintended consequences of the Protestant Reformation. And what I want you to do is, after you finish watching the video, just respond to this. Here's one of the formative tasks I'm going to ask you to do. I want you to choose which of the impacts, according to John Green, of the Protestant Reformation, do you feel was most significant in the long-term history of Europe. And he talks about economic consequences and political and religious consequences. You pick. It doesn't really matter to me which one you pick. There's no wrong answer on this because you're putting yourself into the video. But what does matter, and what I do want you to do, is I want you to root your answer directly in. Again, see how it's out of 12, so that's how you know it's formative. I want you to root your answer clearly in the video and its argument. So don't just say, well, I think it was this because of whatever. What I want you to say is, I believe it was this. As John Green mentioned, what that tells us is okay? So I want you to specifically reference back to the film or to the video. It's only 13 minutes. It's quite good. I like John Green. And go from there. So you're going to do that. And then what we're going to do is, I think I said originally, I'm going to stop presenting that tab. Stop presenting. There we go. I think I said originally on our stream that we were going to meet again at 11 o'clock today. Is that right? Oh, that's not what I wanted. Schedule for Friday, 10 to 10:30. 11:30 is what I said. Perfect. All right. So 11:30. Yes. So right now it is 5 to 10. Watch that video from John Green. Respond to the Google question, and then you've got the next hour and 35 minutes to do that. At 11:30, come back, and I'm going to introduce a task for you to do for this afternoon, which you can either do on your own or you can do in pairs or small groups. And it's a way of looking at several other people like Jean Calvin and Huldrych Zwingli and Jan Hus and so on. A number of other people that are inspired by Martin Luther and do things based on what Martin Luther started, that have unintended consequences. And what you're going to do is you're going to do some research on those people and decide which of them deserves to die for their heresy. That's what you're going to do this afternoon. So come back here at 11:30, Google Meet at 11:30. Right now, watch the John Green video, respond to the question, and then as soon as you got that done, you got some free time to yourself. See you back here at 11:30. Goodbye.